newly born group that represents currently the leading party in Italy, Lega, with Salvini Premier. According to national polls, it is the leading party as of now, and we are growing in North America as well. We want to be a bridge for the Italian community living abroad, for Italian citizens living abroad. We have over 140,000 Italians living in Canada and over 260,000 living in North America. So, Tony, today we are North America-wide and worldwide, I guess, but the core of our viewers today will be coming from North America in general. So let's talk about yourself a little bit, Tony. So you have a very rich resume. Seems like you're a business owner, you're a real estate agent, you're an investor, you're a teacher, you're a principal. So let's talk about yourself a little bit. How did you decide to be a business owner?
Well, business is in my blood. I've had business in my blood since I was a very young boy. My father, being an Italian immigrant here, like many immigrants, ventured out on his own and got into business. I guess it was his role modeling and mentorship that got me into business. And he had his hand in a bunch of different businesses. By trade, he was a barber, but he owned many barber shops. He owned restaurants. He ventured into real estate and a true immigrant experience. Like when my father came to this country, there were, no safety nets, no social safety nets. So you had to rely on your own inner strength and will to obviously make inroads in this country of Canada, because the Italian community, which has a rich history here, had many struggles, especially post-World War. And many of the business people who started businesses in Canada, there was no going back to Italy, obviously, because Italy had been devastated by the Second World War, and they started a new life here in Canada. He was my mentor, and he always emphasized the importance of being your own man. And the only way to be your own man would be through business, where you wouldn't have people basically controlling your destiny. You have to control your own destiny. And that was ingrained in me by my grandfather, who was also an infantry soldier in the Second World War for the Italian Army, a very disciplined man. And so that discipline and that sense of independence, of taking care of yourself and your family, was ingrained in me as a young child. And from there, I've ventured into many businesses, some really well, some not, but all learning experiences which got me to this point.
And that really shows, Tony. You've been really vocal and really passionate in these days during this sanitary emergency and economic emergency as well, as a direct result. You've been really trying to raise awareness around challenges for small businesses, the relationships, I guess, with government, and how you're
correct.
You've been trying to support the local communities as well. So I guess my question is, what are you seeing as far as how people are reacting to your activity, and is there more awareness around small businesses? Are we being successful? And also, we have seen that you've been selling personal protective equipment, masks, gloves,
right,
hand sanitizer. So you really are a beacon of light in these days. So what are you noticing?
Well, it goes back to from
your perspective.
So yeah, Luigi, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you have to learn how to adapt very quickly in this kind of business environment. And my entrepreneurial skills and sense immediately came into play when the government forced the shutdown of my business. I didn't shut my business out of my own doing because I was an irresponsible business owner or I squandered my money. I was forcibly shut down by the government. And when that happens and you're shut down by 2 or 3 months and you're still paying rent and I'm still paying utilities and I'm still paying all these other bills, my taxes, you've got to do something. And, I'm not the kind of person that's going to sit on my hands and wait for a government handout to make it. And you know what? $2,000 a month for my business isn't even a dent. It's nothing. And I'm not saying that $2,000 a month isn't a lot of money, but in my business, I couldn't survive on $2,000 a month. So what I did is I formulated a plan quickly to figure out what kind of economic need there was during a pandemic. And I think we all know there's PPE need, right? Because our government in Canada especially was ill prepared. We weren't prepared for this pandemic. We had nothing. We had no supplies. We have the biggest land mass next to the Soviet Union in the world, and we didn't have warehouses full of PPE. We have nothing, but we've got empty land everywhere. To the north, right to the Arctic, but we were ill prepared. So, unfortunately for Canada, and fortunately for me, I was able to respond with a solution to a problem. The problem was Canada didn't have PPE. I came into play. I found the PPE when maybe other business people weren't able to. And it's just about being resourceful, and it's about being a go-getter, and that's what I am. I don't rely on the government to push me. I'm self-motivated, and I think that's what we need more of here in Canada, and that's what's lacking. And I feel for the next generation of young people, because who are their role models? Who are the big entrepreneurial role models in Canada? They're very few and far between, unfortunately. Like, we see great entrepreneurial role models in Italy. We see great entrepreneurial role models in America, very few in Canada, unfortunately. At least ones that are willing to be public and speak their mind and mentor the young people. So anyways, I got into the PPE because there was a need, and I'm meeting that need. There's a great demand, and it's become a business into itself. And that's how I got into the PPE, by force, unfortunately. But fortunately, I've made a real go of it, and now, thankfully, we've become a wholesaler and distributor of sanitizer, like you said, of medical masks, non-grade medical masks. We actually have a patent pending on a mask that we developed ourselves for athletes, which has been endorsed by TFC2 players, Toronto FC. So, we're taking those steps to make inroads, even though it's a very sour business environment out there right now.
And this is a great example that you're setting, Tony. I mean, we really sympathize for the small business community, just like Lega does in Italy. We do here in Canada. We are very close to the needs for small businesses in general, and it's important for people to understand that small businesses in particular have that flexibility and that reactive possibility to react very quickly to the change in needs in the market. And I think both governments, society as a whole, should really start looking at small businesses a lot differently. And you hit the nail in the head. I mean, Canada is great in a lot of ways. A lot of people come to Canada every year. Hundreds of thousands of people decide to continue their lives in Canada, myself included. I came here 8 years ago. But I agree with you that there has to be more sensitivity around business acumen and how Canada can play a leading role in global dynamics. We don't want to be just a little country north of the U.S. But I guess some of these issues also arise in the U.S. as well, where we have all these small businesses that have to go up against big corporations all the time. Amazon, eBay, those are the standard ones, but there's many others. So I guess this trickles into more of into another conversation about macro systems.
But I just want to point out, Luigi, because
so let's talk more. Let's go back to the practicality of it, right?
You make an excellent point, because obviously you have the large blue chip corporations which dominate multinational business all over the world. But a lot of these multinational big conglomerates started as small businesses. People don't know that Jeff Bezos, the guy who started Amazon, the entrepreneur that started Amazon, started it in his bedroom with one computer. He wasn't the world's greatest entrepreneur of Amazon in 1999. He was a website, a small e-commerce company on the verge of basically going bankrupt. But he survived, he endured, and then he became this big business. Apple Computers, it's the same thing. And we keep talking about, these big companies are ruling the world. I hear everyone talking about Microsoft and Bill Gates. Bill Gates started in his garage. And he may have ulterior motives today, but every small business person starts out as a one-person operation and grows and expands. You start with a dream. That's what I love about America, the American dream. Canada's a great country, but we don't have the leadership in this country to foster business and entrepreneurship. We are very socialist in Canada, and this is leading us down the road that you see we're in right now. Right now, the big problem for small business is that a lot of people are collecting the $2,000 a month subsidy from the government. So when small businesses need to recall employees, a lot of these employees don't want to come back to work because the government's giving them $2,000 a month, and they're saying, hey, why should I come to work for $1,800 a month if I can sit at home and make $2,000? Now, I know everybody needs help during these times, including me, but at the end of the day, there has to be some self-responsibility, and people need to be more responsible for their own economic destiny rather than rely upon the government to take care of them and coddle them and have that safety net. Canada's a great country, but we don't have the right leadership. That's the problem here. And people are not politically active in Canada. In Italy, what I love about Italy, and as dysfunctional as it is in terms of politics, I love Italy because people are politically active, they have an opinion, and they're not afraid to voice their opinion. In Canada, people are afraid to voice their opinion, whether it's about economics, politics, or anything. And because of that, we're led down paths that maybe we shouldn't be going down because the few people that control this big country take advantage of our silence.
And I think you raise a really important point, Tony. I mean, just like every complex matter, it's not everything black and white.
That's
Politics
right.
certainly isn't black or white. There's a lot of gray in between, and like the ancient Romans used to say, the virtue is in the middle, right? So we shouldn't be afraid of that debate. We should be talking openly about it, and we should spark that. We should spark that conversation to constructive conversations. Of course, we don't want to be rude or anything. I think it's fair to say that going back to what you were saying previously is that oftentimes we tend to react in the short term with the $2,000 grants or with rental relief, but what we really want from a government, a really complex machine, is foster that growth and plant the seeds so that business owners in the future have the possibility to grow and do something really good for the world.
I agree.
Sorry to interrupt. We have some questions in the chat. Okay. Federico is the Toronto coordinator, Federico Felli. He is asking if there is a chance for the newcomer Italians to build their future in Canada. And this is another great point that I wanted to also touch on today. There's a lot of skilled workers, there's a lot of managers that want to do business in Canada. What would be your advice to them?
Listen, I totally agree. I think there's tons of opportunity in Canada. Unfortunately, it seems like the Italian government, in selecting their immigrants, no longer look to Europeans, especially Italians, to recruit Italians. It seems like we're recruiting from all other parts of the world, which is totally fine with me. But I think if you want equity in terms of recruiting immigrants, there has to be some fairness. You have to allow Italian skilled labor. You have to allow Italians and Europeans in general to continue to come to Canada. And, you know, Italians did not have an easy road when they immigrated here. There was a lot of racism against Italians in North America in general, in the US and Canada. And there was a period of time that Italians were put in concentration type camps up in Camp Petawawa during the Second World War, internment camps, because they were considered enemy aliens. So people who know history, I've got a history background and a degree, should study what happened to the Italian immigrants in Canada, because it would shock them to see what the Italian community endured here in Canada. It was something out of this world that most young Italians or young Italian Canadians have no idea about. But when you research a little bit, you'll find that the Italians endured quite a bit. And I think Italians today, young Italians, have so much to offer that we should be recruiting from Italy. We should be seeking out Italian immigrants because we need people in this country, obviously. The landmass is too big. We don't have enough immigrants. Why not go to Italy and start basically recruiting skilled Italian labor to come to Canada? I think there's so much opportunity in Canada. I'd love to see more young Italians. We know Italians are skilled engineers, bakers, tailors, fashionistas, anything you can think of, Italians have laid their hands on. So why not bring those people to a country like Canada to enrich it even more? And this is a policy of immigration that's in place by our federal government, which is not right. It's not just. It's not equitable. And it's not equitable for Italians. And people can say whatever they want, but Italians have endured racism and discrimination for decades now, since the Second World War.
That's a really certainly a touchy point that a lot of people can relate to. Discrimination exists, unfortunately, in many parts of the world. It exists in Canada, even though we, because of that fear of debate that you mentioned earlier, we're a bit too scared to acknowledge it, but it certainly is there. Immigration policies sometimes do not have that, do not offer that outlook. Sometimes it's merely seen as importing people for a purely economic turnaround, but I think immigration can do a lot more, and this is a really touchy subject in Italy too, for example, where Lega and Matteo Salvini are accused of being this. They want to close borders, but really there's a lot more that we can learn from immigration, and certainly having a more selective and fair approach that's better administrated can certainly benefit everyone, not just Italians or Canadians or particular groups in particular.
Correct.
So moving forwards in our discussion, I see that we have a lot of positive feedback in our chat. I see a lot of people really, it seems like what we're talking about really resonates with a lot of people, which is exactly what we want to talk about. We want to talk about relevant topics that people can relate to, and ultimately we want to find ways to give everyone an easier time. Going back to synergies between Italians and Canadians, there's a lot of businesses that decide to open in Canada. Unfortunately, sometimes they do see a little bit of pushback because obviously Canada tries to protect its own national interest. So is there examples of successful businesses that have opened in Canada, so they also supported the local economy, but what do you see that worked the most? If you can think of an example of some companies that came from abroad and decided to do business in Canada.
Well, listen, I think that the greatest example, and unfortunately he passed away, he was an Italian-Canadian, Sergio Marchionne, as you know, who ran Fiat and Alfa Romeo. He revived Alfa Romeo here in North America. He brought jobs here by opening up all these dealerships and creating a dealer-vendor system, and he took over Chrysler. So you see an Italian business entrepreneur mindset that goes global and has a positive effect globally, because when a company and a conglomerate, people can say whatever they want about conglomerates, but when a big conglomerate like Fiat, Chrysler, and Jeep sell millions of cars a year, that equates to employment. That equates to people taking care of their families. That equates to people putting food on the table. And that's what I see with Italian business globally. Wherever Italians have gone, and you see it here in Toronto locally, more of at a local level for import-export with food goods, agricultural products. We see Italian products here on every supermarket shelf. So I think we need more economic development between the two countries. I know that it exists already, but there's such a strong synergy between Toronto, especially in Canada, and I'm sure in the U.S. and places like New Jersey and Boston and other places with big Italian communities. But there's such strong synergies that we could really foster and grow Italian-Canadian, Italian-American business if we really focused in and honed in on it. And I think there's multiple examples of Italian businesses, especially here in Canada. We had the Saputo family from Montreal. Saputo and Parmalat, as you know, another massive conglomerate, started in Montreal with an Italian immigrant selling cheese to pizzerias. And it's the biggest dairy producer in the world now. So, there's so many success stories that we can touch upon, but, the Sergio Marchiones, the Saputo family, these are just some that have employed tens of thousands of people because of that Italian entrepreneurship initiative that Italians have. And you see Italians have touched every economic sector from healthcare to food, agriculture, engineering. Look at sport, Ferrari, Formula One. I watched a documentary on Ferrari making ventilators. Their engineers went into action immediately when this COVID-19 breakout happened. They stopped making the automobiles and started making ventilators for the world. And they made it an open source product so that engineers around the world can copy it. Italians did that. They donated that to the world. And that engineering, that Ferrari engineering built into those ventilators is now open source that anyone in the world, China, India, the Soviet Union, Canada, America, can take that engineering and ingenuity and use it in their own countries for free. That is what I'm talking about when I talk about Italian spirit, ingenuity, and entrepreneurship.
And that's exactly the type of mentality that we want to promote, and we hope to see more often in North America as well. Marchione was a great example. He used existing North American infrastructure, bringing technology from Italy. That was a great example. That basically saved a huge company from going bankrupt.
Absolutely.
And so many job losses.
Absolutely.
We have another question from the chat. This is going back to small businesses. How do you think small businesses will change once the pandemic is over? We're seeing a lot of measures being taken, but is it something that's going to go away slowly, or is it that's going to stay permanently?
Unfortunately, Luigi, I think small business is in trouble. The future of small business worldwide is in trouble. I think there's a transformation, and if people haven't realized it yet, they better get onto this. We're moving away from physical retail space into a digital e-commerce world. The 21st century way of doing business, to me, is pretty evident now. It's e-commerce. We're going to have warehouses all over the world, but you're going to buy your products online. It'll be shipped to your door from a warehouse. This is the future of business. So small business has to reinvent itself, just like I'm doing with my own small business. You have to reinvent yourself, because if you do not, you will be one of the casualties. And I think there's going to be massive casualties. 80% of our Canadian economy is small business. And they're talking about 2/3 of restaurants closing down. They're talking about gyms all over the country closing down. They're talking about all sorts of business, clothing retailers closing down, malls being impacted because people don't want to go into shopping malls. They'll be closing down. So as a small business, you have to go on the offensive right now. You have to re-strategize, and you have to say to yourself, how can I transfer what I've been doing into the 21st century? You've got to be digital. You've got to transfer to e-commerce. That would be my advice to all small business owners, because the scary thing, Luigi, is this, and for my own business too. What if a pandemic like this breaks out in 2 years' time again, and we have to go through this all over again? We're all finished. All small business will be finished. We can't endure something like this again. But the possibility of this happening again is very high. So therefore, if I were a small business, I'd really sit down and put a plan in place of how you plan on transforming your business. That's my advice to all the small businesses. The one thing I would say is keep in the trenches, keep fighting, don't give up. I'm not giving up. I'm not closing my doors of On Sportsplex 2. I am going to keep fighting. But right now we're on the defensive. We have to think offensively. How do we move forward, and how do we plan for success?
Absolutely. Yes, 100% agree. And I think it's going to be a big paradigm shift. When they say nothing will be like it was before. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but for the most part, it is true. Meaning that interactions will be different. That working from home was associated with a big stigma. Now it is widely accepted. So also that is going to deeply affect the way business is done, retail space, commercial space, offices. We're going to see big changes in that. Also, you are a real estate agent, correct, Tony?
Yeah, correct.
So there's a lot of issues issues around that too. A lot of people don't know what's happening. A lot of people don't know if they should continue renting. A lot of people cannot pay rent. What are you seeing from a professional perspective?
So I'm going to tell you, I think the federal government completely fumbled this rent relief program. I think it's an idiotic program, although it's going to help us a little bit. I've just applied for it, hoping that I can get back rent because I've been paying my rent. So I think moving forward, you just said it, there's going to be a reshifting of where people will work. People will work from home because it's acceptable now. People have learned how to use Zoom. People have learned how to use technology. So there will no longer be a need. Maybe you were renting 10,000 square feet of office space. Now you only need 5,000. Maybe you were renting 2 floors of a Bay Street office building. Now you only need 1 floor. It's going to be hurtful for commercial real estate. I can guarantee you that. And for malls, it will be even worse. And I hate to say it because it's the reality. If you own a store in a mall, you're going to have a tough time, a very tough time moving forward. And if you own a mall, like a lot of these big REITs do, they're going to have a hard time getting tenants because people won't want to take a chance and lease long term and put down a financial commitment for the future, knowing that, God forbid, this happens again, they'll be wiped out. So I think the real estate market, commercial is definitely going to take a hit. I think residential will as well, because power of sales in Toronto are at an all-time high. This last month, we had 60 power of sales. It's a record. We've never had it before in Toronto. So what that tells me is people who were just hanging on with their mortgages, or people who were just hanging on, making it paycheck to paycheck and bill to bill, can no longer hang on. And you're going to see prices drop, I'm estimating 15 to 20% in residential real estate. And it's unfortunate because we were on such a high note in terms of real estate. The market was slightly inflated here in Canada, so the prices were high. So this is an adjustment. For some people, it will be a good adjustment because it's an opportunity to get into the market at a cheaper price point.
And how about loosening regulations? Central banks, are they promoting people from accessing credit? Or
no, credit is tightening up. So the CHMC, which is the insurance company for the federal government, which regulates mortgages, it's a mortgage insurance company, CHMC, just said the first-time home buyers now have to put down 10%, not 5%. So they increased it from 5 to 10%. So they're making it tougher for young people to get mortgages. They also just announced today that multi-unit landlords who own residential buildings or residential complexes can no longer refinance their mortgages to get credit when they refinance. So if you have a 5-year mortgage in 5 years' time when it expires and you got to refinance, they can give you a mortgage again, but they won't give you lines of credit. They're no longer giving lines of credit. So credit is tightening up. We are in a credit crunch. And you can talk to any mortgage broker or mortgage agent and they will tell you it's tougher than ever for their clients to get a mortgage now, especially for people who have lost their jobs. If you've got no income and you go to your bank and say, I want to buy a house, guess what? You're not getting any money. So, you don't got an income, you're done.
Which is a bit of an oxymoron considering interest rates have been historically really low.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. So we've got low interest rates, but people can't buy because they can't qualify. So the only people who can take advantage of those low interest rates are people who have cash. So if you're cash rich right now, you've got a massive advantage.
Which is something that we're seeing in Italy as well. The housing market is at rock bottom. Credit is in some occasions they pay banks to let them lend.
It's negative.
Credit.
Negative interest rates.
It's still not seemed to spark that growth again, and I guess this indicates that there's something deeper to it. Like we said before, it's not a black and white answer. There's a lot of gray in between. Complex problems do not have simple solutions, and this is why it takes a lot of critical sense. And it takes a lot of research to really understand what's going on. But most importantly, it takes a lot of ingenuity and creativity to harness the changes that are happening and make the most of it and embrace the future, just like you're doing, Tony.
Thank you. And I think, what we really need to work on here in North America, and I see it in Italy. In Italy, people have a sense of pride of being Italian. I think being Italian comes with a sense of history and pride of centuries of building something great. And because Canada is such a young country, we lack that. We don't have that history that Italians have. I'd love to have that here in Canada because I think young people lack self-esteem, and because our country is so young, we don't have the history to back up national pride like Italy does. Italy's gone through so much, First World War, Second World War. It's got all that history. We in Canada are a very young country, and we are still building our history, so we lack self-esteem.
Certainly, the history plays a big role in how people perceive themselves and the pride that they take, and the roots. For example, people here might be third-generation Italian, but they still consider themselves Italian. Canadians,
Correct.
but with Italian background. So that persists in the way we eat, and the way we do things, in family functions, our social interactions. So that certainly is something that in a country like Canada we can export as well. So it's not just a matter of exporting good, but we can export a sense of ownership for what you do, a sense of pride, a sense of passion, which is something that I think everyone should live by. And certainly Italy can also learn a lot from Canada as well. And this is why, as Lega nel Mondo, we have 1 foot in Italy, 1 foot in the rest of the world. So we always try to look at the best of both worlds, because ultimately what we're trying to do is benefit people. That is the ultimate goal of politics, or at least that's what it should be, correct?
That's right.
And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. And that's why we like to talk to people to get feedback directly from them. And a lot of people might say that Canada and Italy, well, they have nothing in common. They're polar opposites. Well, I don't think so. I think they have a lot of similarities between them. They're industrialized, advanced economies that in recent years have witnessed a decline in self-reliance.
Correct.
Just like you were saying before.
Correct.
We've been outsourcing everything. We have our manufacturing capabilities are going lower and lower. Business owners are discouraged. Access to credit is critical, and those are the similarities. And Italy has been in turmoil, we can say, for in previous years, because a change is much needed, and I think it will eventually. Canadians will also eventually be sensitized to that and be more aware of those problems as time progresses and as more people get affected. We have one more question from our chat. Does Toronto have an Italian Camera di Commercio? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Tony, but I do believe, I don't remember exactly the names, but there are some associations for Italian businesses. I'm not sure if
there are many.
Canadian businesses. Tony, you might want to add something to that?
Yeah, there are many. There's the ICBPA. There's the Italian Congress. There are many organizations. There's the Italian Canadian Trade Organization. So there's several organizations that promote business between our two countries. But the key thing is, I just want to go back to, I want to answer that as well. And you can reach out to any one of these organizations. They love bringing new members on. The key thing that Italy and Canada have in common is that we've put ourselves in a vulnerable position. We are very vulnerable to the world because we have given up our independence in terms of manufacturing power. When you no longer manufacture your own goods and services, you are vulnerable. And we see that. We've seen that with coronavirus. And hopefully it's a lesson that we can learn and say, hey, you know what? In the future, we can't put ourselves in a weak position like this where everyone can take advantage of us, because we saw it when Trump and the U.S. didn't want to send over the N95 masks. He called 3M and said, no masks go to Canada. Now, ultimately, he let the masks go through the border. But if that would not have happened, we were at the mercy of the world. And Italy's in the same position. And Italy's super reliant on China, just like Canada is. Italy is super reliant on Southeast Asia, just like Canada is. And not that trade is a problem. I'm pro-trade. I'm pro-international business. But you have to have a little bit of national manufacturing to make sure that in a situation like this COVID-19, we are not left vulnerable the way we were. And I hope that Canada and Italy both have learned that lesson right now.
I think it certainly is a wake-up call, and I have participated in the past to some conferences around taking back manufacturing, which is not just a catchphrase, it's something real. There's a lot of theses, there's a lot of proposals, there's a lot of studies being done on the procurement side of things and the financials. Often people justify certain actions by saying, oh yes, but labor is 80% cheaper in X country. Well, it's not just a labor portion. That accounts for only a very small percentage of the end cost of a certain good or service. It's all the transportation costs that you have and all the indirect costs, so insurance for shipping and pollution. So if we adopt a holistic approach, it's not just a matter of dollars and cents, but it is something that ultimately is going to affect every segment of society. So we really hope that this is a wake-up call for all of us. I hope that our viewers and our followers take this message, they talk to other people about it, they spread the message, and that's what we're here for. We want to promote the message that we support as a political group, not just in Canada, not just the US, but in Italy and everywhere else in the world. And we hope that something good can come out of this. I don't think there's any more questions in the chat. I think we've gone through all of them. That was a really, really rich session, Tony.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Instagram puts a time limit on live sessions, so we're gonna have to call it a day. But
no problem.
We are really happy that you joined us today, and you gave your insight.
Thank you.
And hoping to see you even personally in the future.
For sure.
Okay?
For sure. I just want to leave on one note. Buy Italian and buy Canadian. That's the key. Because if we do not support our own industries and workers, you will see that within the next decade, we will no longer have control of this beautiful country or Italy, because you need to have your own destiny in control. So buy Canadian, buy Italian.
Absolutely. Sempre.
Thank you, Luigi.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who joined the live session today. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, Luigi. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.